All right, we don't want to waste time, so we'll switch mics for the moment. So a couple years ago, when Rabbi Vogel and I were thinking about what are we going to do together to create a single service on second day Rosh Hashanah, how many of you have been to all of our second day joint services? Now, there's no more joint. We're one. We're one. You know what to expect. So we started a few years ago this dialogue. It sometimes looked like a debate, sometimes a dialogue. Today we'll see, but we do want your participation. And in thinking about what we wanted to talk about, well, let me share with you the following. Rushworth Kidder, author of Resolving the Dilemmas of Ethical Living, says that a moral dilemma is not about choosing between right and wrong, but rather about choosing between right and right. In other words, in an ethical dilemma, there is no wrong answer, and you can't choose both options. Let me make sure that sits with you for a minute, right? In a moral dilemma, there is not about right and wrong. It's choosing between right and right. In other words, in an ethical dilemma, there is no wrong answer, and you can't choose both options. I would add, there also sometimes is no right answer. In a moral dilemma, the decision maker must consider two or more moral values or duties, but can only honor one of them. This means that the individual will violate at least one important moral concern regardless of the decision. So what do you think we're going to talk about today? The ballot issues? No. Good guess. We're going to talk about who you should vote for. No, we're not going to talk about that at all. We are going to talk about the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. Think about it. A moral decision where there is no right and there is no wrong. There are two very difficult choices. So my question is to you, Rabbi Vogel, and all, why would the rabbis choose such a complicated, difficult, challenging, somewhat ambiguous text of all the texts that we could have read today on Rosh Hashanah? Why the binding of Isaac? You know what I think? I think the rabbis knew the story was complex, and I think the rabbis understood its challenges, and to me the rabbis were saying, faith, blind faith, is a terrible thing. Not all faith, but blind faith is a terrible thing. I think the rabbis knew exactly what they were doing here, and they chose this story to challenge us about our own understanding of our connection to God, our commitment to our faith, and our principles and ideals.
And I know it is still not going, Daniel. Is it okay better? We're a little better. Great. And it was great when we started talking about this. We had what's our point of debate? And the truth of the matter is, I believe in the sophistication. I believe in the sophistication of the rabbis, and I knew that they were critical and they had different variations of it. But I think they put it in here today to talk about, if you will, unmitigated faith. Like even in times in which you think it may not be, like you're not clear, like just follow the voice of God. Now, that's problematic. That is totally problematic because, by the way, there's a midrash that completely argues against it. Right? There's some of you know this, the midrash, and it says that where God calls to. By the way, how many of you, if you had been Abraham, just a show of hands, how many of you would have just said, "Yes, I'm taking my son. I'm going to sacrifice him"? And how many of you? Come on, nobody has faith. Like, come on. Like, okay. Well, Steve, we'll talk about your relationship with your son later, but it's okay. Yeah, I know.
I don't believe them. I believe if you are in the situation that Abraham was in, it's easy in your situation today with the moral understanding that you have and on reflecting and looking back at the story. But I wonder if you had the relationship with Abraham that God had with Abraham. This wasn't the first time that they'd spoken together.
Abraham went. He left with knowing nothing. God said, "Just go someplace." I'll go. I mean, he went. He had no itinerary. Like, there was no ticket. So hold on. So there's a midrash that's going to argue against what I said, and we talked about this. Because when God calls to him, he says, Vayomer kachna et bincha, take your son, of which Abraham responded, what? I have 2 sons. Yechidcha, the only one. He says, wait a minute. One's the only one from one mother, one's the only one from another mother. The one that you love, I love them both. And then he says Isaac. The rabbis in that midrash want to see Abraham arguing. They can't believe that a father would just say, all right, I'll take him and sacrifice him. So they do. I acknowledge that this is really complicated. I'm not sure if the rabbis put it in there for that purpose. But we want to explore, and we're going to get to in moments, moral implications in your own lives. We don't want to keep this theoretical. This is just, I know some of you want to respond already. But we want to see, like, in what ways does it apply to your own life. So that's one moral implication of this first part. We divide it into 3 parts. We don't think we're going to get to all 3, do we?
Not a chance.
So 1 is the call that we've been talking about. 2 is the journey of Abraham with Isaac and with the servants. And the 3rd one is when he's actually prepared to sacrifice him. All 3 have different moral questions that revolve around them. There's another moral question when he hears the call. Did he tell his wife Sarah? How many of you, the story doesn't tell us. And by the way, there's a strong midrash that says that he didn't, because when he came back and told her what he almost did, that she dies, and that's v'chaye Sarah, and that she passes away at the, after he comes back from that. But how many of you, it was interesting, the gender, I don't know, vote here. How many of you would have told your spouse about what you were about to do? Raise your hand. You're not.
So
wait a minute. Those of you don't believe in being honest.
Bill's hand went up very quickly.
Okay. Why would you have told? Why would you have told Lisa? Because you believe in sharing everything. Is that what you just said?
So Bill said, Bill said that he would tell Lisa because she needs to know everything. She needs to understand what is at stake. Ofer? Okay, so Ofer suggests that Ofer would tell Carrie so that Carrie could stop him from doing what it is that he was about to do. Roy? Is
that what he said?
What? Say. So Roy wants to make sure that he has lunch today. And so he said about Nadine, I always consult with my wife because she has very good judgment. In other words, no, but I think there's something important there. What happens is when we get so fixated on a vision, on a value, on an ideal, when we hear a voice in our head or in our heart, sometimes we get so locked in the moment that we can't see anything else. And what you're suggesting is that in those very moments in which we know we are so tunnel focused, who can we turn to? Who is important in our life to be able to say, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think?
But then there's a question. The question might be, can you think of an example of where you would not tell your spouse something? For a good moral reason.
Steve.
All right, wait, let's clarify that. For a good moral reason. I know where your minds were on the other stuff. Get it out of there.
They were talking about having that extra bowl of ice cream. That's all they were thinking about. Steve.
No, but now we're going to give you an example from you. Is there something that you would, we want to get personal. Okay, go ahead. All right, so you're keeping it in the story, Stephen. I want to apologize.
But I think what Steve is saying is when you deny the truth to yourself, that's when you don't share with somebody else. Is that what you're saying? You're not going to share with your spouse when you don't really believe yourself that you're going to do something or not do something. That's what you're saying?
All right.
Oh,
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go, Russ.
Russ. Okay, Russ said something really important. Sometimes we may not tell somebody that we love because we don't want to cause them undue worry. Right? We went to the doctors, we got a potential diagnosis, and the last thing that we want to do is tell those with whom we love so that we create potentially unnecessary worry. That's Russ's suggestion. Okay, so Ellen is suggesting it's not that you're not willing to tell the person you love, it's that you're not willing to say it in the moment. Something else might be going on in his life, in her life, in your life, in other people's life where you need to set it up. You need to make sure that you have the appropriate moment. Do you think that's what Abraham was doing here? Do you think Abraham was trying to protect his wife because he knew that she would? Yeah, Erwin. You should read Torah. That was good. No, you ruined it, Erwin. You ruined it by telling us that. Okay, so Erwin is suggesting that there is a pattern that Abraham has developed with God and that God has developed with Abraham such that Abraham is not the first time that Abraham has just blindly gone. It's actually the second time that Abraham has blindly gone. So therefore God trusted. Again, right, even in that moment, the question still arises. Just because I've done something in the past, because I've gone down that path once, does that mean that I shouldn't invite other people into the conversation?
Let's go on to part. We thought we'd do at least 2 parts. You want to do part 2?
Yes, sure.
Okay. The fact that you still want to talk about it is great. We want it to inspire more discussion. So what's part 2, Rabbi Camras?
Well, on the third day, Abraham looked up and saw. Okay, so so that we know, quick review. Part 1 is the question is when you get the call, do you share that call? When you feel something in your heart that you have to do something, do you share it with the people that you love most deeply? Or do you protect them and not say anything? That's part number 1. Part number 2. So on the third day, Abraham looked up and saw the place from afar. Then Abraham said to his servants, "You stay here with the ass. The boy and I will go up there. We will worship and we will return to you." Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and put it on his son Isaac. He himself took the firestone and the knife, and the two, as Rabbi Mendelson said, walked off together. Then Isaac said to his father, it said to Abraham, "Father," and he said, "Hineni." "Yes, my son." And he said, "Here is the firestone and the wood, but where is the sheep for the burnt offering?" Isaac is no dummy, right? Isaac is no dummy. How old is Isaac in the story?
We don't know.
37 years old, according to the rabbis. So he said, and Abraham said, "It is God who will see to the sheep for the burnt offering, my son." And again, and the two of them walked on together. So what? Do you think Abraham was really going to sacrifice his son? How many of you think that Abraham's intention in this moment was that he was going to sacrifice his son?
Raise your hand if you thought he was going to. Okay.
How many of you think Abraham, not a chance, was he going to sacrifice his son?
And the rest are voting independent, I guess. It's,
okay, one representative of why you think Abraham was going to sacrifice his son. Yeah, Fumani. Okay, so Kierkegaard over here in the voice of Fumani. That's a compliment, right? Abraham was a man of faith, and a man of faith is going to live his or her life. A person of faith is going to live their life consistently. And even in the moments where it seems like there is absolutely no way out, which is the book of plays that Soren Kierkegaard wrote, even then, you're still going to move forward. Okay, who says that Abraham wasn't going to? Is that Sandy in the back? Sandy.
The big hat.
I should have known from that beautiful hat. Okay, so Sandy's suggesting that there's a significant difference, Erwin, between the first example of Abraham's faith and the second example of Abraham's faith. And Abraham believes so much in God that Abraham believes that God would not ask Abraham to do something that absolutely makes no moral sense. Dr. Powell.
Right, we know he's willing to stand up against God, Rabbi Camras.
Yeah. So for those of you who didn't hear Dr. Powell, Bruce Powell, he said that there's inconsistency in Abraham's behavior because we know that he does argue with God when it comes to total strangers during the story of Sodom and Gomorrah.
Right, but it's so interesting. When we talked about this, we talked about that he takes away moral choice for Isaac. Right, think about it. He was making a moral choice for his son. He could have told him, but he's 37 years old. He said he bound him. Here's another question. Do you think that Isaac was fighting back at all? Do you think? You think, Ellen, he was fighting back? Come on, his father's over 100 years old. I mean, how much do you have? Like, come on, like, it wouldn't take much to overpower his father. So, by the way, so in one way, there could be this passive moral choice that Isaac makes. And how many times in our lives do we do this? By not saying anything.
Or there's a midrash that says that Isaac actually says to his father, bind these tighter, because I don't want to in any way kick you or get in the way of the action that you are committed to. Isaac understands what's at stake. Isaac is willing to give his life over. Isaac is like those soldiers in Israel who, not because they need to, because they're called up, but they choose to go to fight the war in Gaza, even knowing that they're risking potentially their lives. That's the Isaac of the Midrash. What do you think about that? How does that sit with you? Do you want to see Isaac in that way? How many of you like that Isaac, appreciate that Isaac, who's willing to sacrifice himself over self-preservation? How many of you are like, no way, raise your hand. That's not the Isaac. Anat, yes. I was hoping that somebody, and thank you, Anat, for saying that. Anat is suggesting that this is a story that is challenging the cultural mores of the time. Child sacrifice was something that was very common in those days. Rabbi Vogel and I studied a couple days ago Michael Rosenak, who's an educational philosopher, and he shares about this story. He says, imagine you, Abraham, are the commander of a military troop. And there has to be a selection of one soldier who is going to go on a suicidal mission. And the soldiers draw lots. And nobody knows. All the soldiers want to do it. None of them want to do it. They all want to risk their lives, and none of them want to risk their life. Well, the lot is chosen, and the only person who sees that is the commander. It just so happens that the commander's son is also in the unit. And it just so happens that the commander's son is the one that was chosen, that lot. And the commander in this moment has a choice, because nobody knows other than the commander, that he could say to his son, sorry, you were the one who was chosen. You're the one who has to go on this suicide mission. Or nobody knows, he can actually take a different lot and choose somebody else in his son's place. And he knows how much his mother loves his son. He loves that son. He knows what it would be to his mother if his son died, if her son died. Does he change and put somebody else in to save his own son? Or does he live with the choice, the moral dilemma, where there's no right answer in that situation, and choose as it was his son for that suicidal mission?
But did he take away from his son his personal moral choice of being able to fight? Right? What if his son had said, I want to go off. I want to be the one who's doing this. I don't want any of my friends to do it. It's not fair for you to take that choice away from me. Right? So it becomes complicated. We could let's give Danny, he's got his hand up there, and then we're going to, I think we're going to have to wrap this up. He was fated, the commander was fated.
Well, what does that mean?
Oh, that's so interesting. If you heard, like, maybe this is sort of like the Queen Esther complex, right? Like, she was there at the right moment to save the Jewish people. He was there at the right moment to save his son. By the way, that sometimes is a way to self-validate our actions. It can be, unless we have to believe we're there for a purpose. But understand, what we want to get and we want to focus on is a sense of the story is not just a story in ancient times, whether it exactly happened this way or not. It's a reflection of the moral choices that we have in our own lives and how we respond to God, how we respond to people around us. How do we believe when we want to make a moral choice and we take those choices away from other people? What does it mean to be tested, for example? What do you think about testing?
I think I'm tested every day.
By who? By me?
Where is a couch? Let me lie down.
I couldn't resist. It couldn't be Carolyn. It couldn't be. It would have to be me.
No. It's got to be you. It's got to be you. My work husband. I think we're tested all the time. The choices may not be as significant in their decision-making that was Abraham's, to tell Sarah, not to tell Sarah, to invite Isaac into the conversation, to not invite Isaac into the conversation, to say to God, you've pushed me too far. This is not a faith that I can be part of, right? Those are big, but I think in many ways, each one of those, we do face all the time in our life. We face the moment in which we need to or not need to share with the people we love certain things that are going on in our heart and in our minds. And we do come at moments all the time in the question of, what does it mean to be a Jew? What does it mean to believe in God? What does it mean to be willing to change my life and what I choose to do, not because it's good for me, but there is a higher calling. There is a source outside of me that makes demands on my life, that causes me, forces me to change in a way that I'm not necessarily comfortable doing in the moment, but still willing to take that leap of faith.
What about the other people in their lives? We talked about, there's a rabbinic debate about the test. It's called a test from God. But God, if you take God, the image of God seriously, God knows how we're going to respond. Is that correct? Does God know how you're going to respond in this image we have of God? Is there any question that God wouldn't know? So in this theology, the test is not about God, but it's about us. The test is for us. to see whether we pass the test or not. And in doing that, we prove to ourselves, does that make sense, about that ethical standard we have. But part of the ethics is, and what we lose sight in our society is that when you are ethical, when you are moral, it often comes with a price, doesn't it? There's this great example I love when I teach with parents and students and teachers about when the teacher has mismarked the grade, and instead of getting a B+, is given an A-. And the student goes up to the teacher and says, I want you to know you added it up wrong. It really should have been like a B+ instead of an A-. Right? Should the teacher change the grade to an A- for the kid's honesty? Kid was honest. Right? Many times people will say, oh, reward him for being honest. But the truth of the matter is, in the long run, we don't teach the lesson that to do the right thing often will come at a cost. To be honest in moments when it's going to cost you in some way, you lose that sense of you're always going to be rewarded for being honest. That's not the way, is that the way the world works? You all know that. So this is part of, I think, how the story is trying to tell us, is that there are different ways of looking at morality. Is it from your morality or from someone else's morality? In which way does it sense that we have to be careful that we're making the right choice? Should he have told Sarah or not? Should he have told his son or not? How do we engage others when we make moral choices? So we want you...
Perhaps that's why the rabbis chose this story on Rosh Hashanah. Perhaps they chose it because there are so many ways. It's like a prism in our life. There are so many ways in which we can refract truth in this story, and maybe that in and of itself is a powerful message. Just when we think we know, maybe there's another way of looking at things. There's always another way of looking at things, and don't ever be too certain. Don't ever think that the way you see it in this moment is the only way to see it, because we can turn it and turn it and turn it and continue to discover hidden truths in whatever it is that we are living in our lives.
Amen.